In 2012, Mike Bagale was named Executive Chef of Alinea, one of the world's most talked about restaurants in Chicago. He combines a unique mix of a broadly artistic mind with a calm, pragmatic, and practical approach to running a complex kitchen. It was his relentless drive and work ethic that moved him quickly up the ladder at Alinea, where he cracked the code to floating food with the famous balloon course, as featured in the Netflix documentary Chef's Table. Mike joins us today as we talk about creativity, work ethic, and curiosity. I'm Ashton Gustafson, and this is Good, True, and Beautiful. Hey guys, Ashton Gustafson here, and welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I am beyond excited today to introduce you guys to a new friend of mine. A couple weeks ago, I had the awesome opportunity to eat at Alinea in Chicago. Maybe you've heard about this restaurant, one of the most talked about restaurants in the country and the world for that matter. They've received 3-star Michelin, James Beard Awards. They've been on Chef's Table. They're breaking the mold as far as things go in the food scene across the world. And I reached out to a guy. He's the executive chef of Alinea, and I've admired his work from afar for some time now. His creativity, the genius he brings to his work is just amazing. And so I reached out and said, hey, would you come share with us your insights and a little bit of that genius that you have? And he said yes. So with that being said, Mike Bagale joins us from Alinea, Chicago. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet, man. So where do we begin with you and your work in the world? Maybe someone's a stranger to you and they haven't crossed paths with you and what you do. Where do you begin?
It's a difficult place to, I guess, start that conversation. But the simplest form, at the end of the day, I'm a chef.
Yeah.
The kind of chef that I've chosen to be is kind of in a little different atmosphere than you might expect from a chef. The work that we do at Alinea is extremely innovative and very thoughtful, and a lot of work goes in behind the scenes. So it's almost like a finishing school for me.
Absolutely. So what led you kind of to saying, I want to be in this culinary space? Kind of before your journey at Alinea, when and where? What was that like in your story to kind of say, hey, I think this is the path I want to go?
I was cooking in South Florida before I moved to Chicago, and I took my job seriously. I was the chef of a hotel and had a lot of fun, and I was doing really well in terms of my own creativity and enjoying myself and my day-to-day operation. But I had a lot of responsibility in terms of my job title. I was the chef de cuisine of a hotel, and I was in my early 20s. And I kind of like reached a point where I didn't really like, it was a little bit too, I wasn't ready, basically. I felt like internally I hadn't achieved what I wanted to achieve, and I wasn't in the place that I wanted to be to call myself a chef yet.
Wow.
And I realized that I had a smaller window of time to kind of seize a greater opportunity. And ultimately, I just wanted to be the best chef that I could be and as professional as I could be and go somewhere where I could have that opportunity. So Alinea, like I was classically trained most of my career, and I was looking for other jobs, admittingly, and I saw an ad posted by Grant Achatz saying he was looking for cooks. And I was like, perfect. I had been following his work, admiring his work, and he was doing things that I had not seen or known that was even possible in the culinary world.
Yeah.
And I wanted to enhance my technique. And I said, you know what? I'm going to drive up to Chicago and try out for a job. And that's what I did.
Wow.
And he offered me the job. And, that was 8 years ago.
Wow. So 8 years ago, you head up to Chicago, and here's what I love about your story. I didn't know this, but for me, there's been guys in business, philosophers, thought leaders, guys that are pushing the envelope, and you sometimes need someone to mirror something that is inside of you, but you can see it in them maybe more than you see it in yourself at the moment. but you know that's where you want to go. Was that kind of what you were seeing where Grant was taking things?
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that definitely is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to, in the very basic sense of who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I had potential, which I believe that I did, that the only way to maximize that potential was to go somewhere where somebody, if I proved myself in that environment, would give me that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I just one of those things where I just had to know.
Hmm.
I had to determine what was next for me and like what I wanted out of life. And I made a decision that, I wanted to do something that hopefully be a participant in something amazing one day. And I believe that that thought process has got me where I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you could pick a word for like this discipleship program, I'm going to call it that. It's not necessarily that, but to study under Grant, like what would a word be that you could say has helped cultivate this, has helped form you into who you are today? Yeah.
It's a good question. That's deep. Discipleship's a big word. I guess if it was one word, it would be rewarding.
Yeah.
And I say that because it that comes way after the fact.
Yeah.
But I think when you dedicate yourself to something, the type of environment that makes almost anybody successful, no matter what field it is, it's usually grueling and stressful, and it's a huge sacrifice. But ultimately, when you're doing those things because you believe in them and you sacrifice yourself that way, then it starts to become extremely rewarding because you get to see the reactions and the byproducts of all that work. So, it was tough, but and it's tough every day. And I would never be able to do it if I wasn't able to see the reward from it.
So, and that was 8 years ago. You basically showed up, and was it like? I mean, forgive my language for not knowing what to call it. A tryout, show us your stuff. What's that like?
It's actually called a stage.
A stage, okay.
Yeah, and a stage is an industry term. It's actually there's two types of stages. There's a stage that's a tryout, which means you're in somebody else's space temporarily to determine whether or not you're the best fit, which is like also a tryout, like you said. And then we have a stage where you can, and this culture has changed a lot over the years, but where one person will volunteer free labor in exchange for knowledge.
Right
in this case, I did a 2-day stage, and it was a tryout, and they gave me like a big to-do list, and depending on my performance, they determined whether or not they were going to hire me.
Wow, very cool. And so they offer you a spot, a position, a place, and 8 years later now, I mean, you're the executive chef. And when I ate there a couple weeks ago, I got to peek back in there, saw you doing your thing back there. What's it been? What's the ride been like? I mean, I can't imagine that journey for you in these last few years.
It's been the greatest part of my life.
Right on.
It started with like the first day that I started there, I was filled for the first time in my life.
Wow. Listen
anxiety.
To that.
Like when I started working at Alinea, and I'm not saying this to make a point, but I honestly had never experienced anxiety before. and I didn't even know what it was until I started feeling it. And I was like, oh my God, this is what anxiety is.
Wow.
Because I doubted myself, and I actually didn't. And I was somebody who always believed in myself and said I could do anything and conquer anything. And, everything was going to be easy for me because I was like that confident / arrogance. And then I got there and I realized that, like, holy shit, this is intense.
Yep.
And I really started doubting myself. But that ultimately gave me a harder mind, harder skin, and also fueled my desire to push
Mm-hmm.
through it
Mm-hmm.
and to get the most out of it. And so for those 8 years, it's increasingly been more rewarding.
Yeah.
I started off as a cook, and then I got promoted to a sous chef after 11 months, and then I got promoted to a chef de cuisine. And immediately after my first promotion, I was able to become a part of the creative team, which is really why I stuck around, because for me that was a huge honor, and it was a huge trust factor that Grant thought highly enough of me and trusted me enough that he wanted to work as a team with me and help create the new identity for Alinea, which is new every day basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, between that and travel and pop-ups and relationships and everything that's happened over the past 8 years, I wouldn't trade it for a thing.
So, walk me through pressing into that anxiety. Like, I think that is I would love to hear your insight on this, because all of a sudden you're there, you're on the stage, it's on. And then, the lizard brain, the amygdala, fear starts talking.
Yeah.
What was your process to press into that, to push through, to get to that simplicity on the other side of, what felt difficult at one time?
It's so for me personally, it was hard, but I embraced the challenge because even up until that point, until now, I've never quit anything in my life. And I remember that moment in particular where I was like, oh my God, I'm finally going to quit something. I'm finally going to admit that I can't do this.
Wow.
And I entertained that notion for, I don't know, a few weeks, maybe even a couple months, where I was like, what am I doing this for? Because it was, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. The stress was like overcome, and I was constantly doubting myself. And I was like, why am I doing this? And I kept telling myself, if you make it through this, that's the point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had that discipline, and admittingly, it wasn't easy, and it's not easy for, the 99.9, maybe 100% of the people that come in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's also applicable to anything that, you consider to be the best of,
Yeah.
whether it's, I mean, for us, we consider it Top Gun, and that restaurant's pretty elite. And, I just couldn't live with, the regret.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I've reorganized myself. I stayed in shape. I was very thoughtful about everything I did. I did things the harder way as opposed to taking shortcuts to ensure that my end product was always what it should be. I changed,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really necessary part in becoming more is change.
So, if I'm hearing what you're saying, the headwinds started to be your guide of, yeah, this is the right spot for you. Like, rather than bail, rather than exit, you were like, no, this must be part of the path. If this is what I'm after, if this is who I want to be and where I want to go.
Correct.
It's like you changed that vernacular a bit in your head and said, oh, this is just how it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had already determined that I wasn't happy and I wanted something more, which was the reason for going there.
Yeah.
So for me to get there and cash in or cash out before I even, accomplished anything would have been the ultimate failure.
So in 8 years, what would you say separates Chef Achatz from other chefs in the world? What is it? What's, if you could mention that one thing that you've noticed in him that's rubbed off on you, that's that difference maker, what would that be?
That separates him from other chefs in the world?
Yeah.
It's really his caliber. And when I say that, I mean, literally the caliber of chef. I mean, he's in that 1% category.
Yeah.
I mean, just like Alinea is in that 1% category of restaurants, because he sits amongst the most talented, successful, influential chefs in history. And like, you can look at that statistically, but I think, the longevity in which he has maintained his success is really a testament to the validity of his caliber.
Yeah.
Like, it's the restaurant industry is brutal, as I'm sure you know, as a businessman or as a cook. But to be a chef owner of a place and to sustain it on a day-to-day basis, day in and day out, year after year, I mean, Alinea's he's the quintessential professional.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would
Wow.
say it's caliber.
Wow. So I love the essence of story that you bring to kind of walking through your career. My sense is that your journey as a chef, you've also come to know yourself more as you've progressed in your career. Um, and I'm noticing this in my own career. You want to walk with me on, you pushed through the anxiety. You didn't think you could do it. You did it, and now you see the world anew. And I'm sure that kind of process has repeated itself. And I'm sure you're even now noticing it in the way you create and the ideas that you come up with. Are you seeing like everything from your presence, your consciousness, your self-awareness? Is it all moving with you as you move along in your career?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Um,
each day you learn something new about yourself, and then you can self-express that through your creation. It's like you're half chef, but you're maybe 49% chef, 51% artist. That's what it feels like.
and there's a percentage of own psychologist in there, you know,
Right.
but yeah, totally. Um, you're absolutely right, and I think that's that uniqueness is the key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a very reciprocal relationship between your personal life and the life that you have as your job. I mean, they need to kind of be homogenous,
Mm.
um, because I feel like that's the goal. I mean,
Yeah.
not just to be happy, but also successful in what you do, and you have to believe in what you do so fully, that you can contribute in the most sincere way. And
Yeah.
that's what makes things genuine. And like from our day-to-day thought process at work and outside of work, it's one and the same. And it doesn't get convoluted. Well, it does, but you have to find a way out of it.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like being like extremely genuine, you can't learn that or train that. So I take a lot of pride in the fact that um, I try to become a better person in my job and a better person in my life and let that person evolve,
Yeah.
because I think that's what we're meant to do.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And that authenticity translates to your very work within Alinea. The
Yes.
truer you can be to yourself, that we'll taste it on the plate. It'll be something new. It'll be refreshed and anew. That's the sense I get from all of you guys. Like, I've been around the country and gone to some pretty sweet places, but when I experience what you guys are doing there, it's more of a metaphor than it is a meal, right?
Yeah.
Um, like, hey, you need to go new places. You need to be stretched. This is just a meal. It just so happens to be the meal we're trying to convey that at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, and I tell the cooks this all the time, is from the Oregon track coach Bill Bowerman, when he told his runners, he's like, if you guys can find meaning in the type of dedication that it takes to succeed at running, then you can find meaning in life.
Hmm.
And it's so applicable, and you spend your day in and day out at Alinea, and we all do, and they're not always the best days, and they're always pretty hard. But if you are constantly getting something out of it, and you're growing, and we're having foresight, and we're changing, then it's perfect.
Yeah.
And you can't ask for a whole lot more than that.
Yeah.
But if you go day in and day out and you're not pulling from it, then that's where the struggle becomes real.
Beautiful. Love it. So what disciplines have you cultivated outside of the kitchen, outside of the workplace? So let's pause the Alinea talk. What are the things that you have learned to pursue, so that when you come back into the workplace on stage where you're making your art, you do show up refreshed, anew, and ready to do something different?
I think the biggest thing is organization, which
Interesting.
oh yeah. I mean, look, I'd like to say that my job is nothing but creativity, and I'm like, all I get to do is, paint beautiful pictures all
Right.
day, and people look at them and say they're amazing. But
Yeah.
the reality of the situation is it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of failure. But the organization makes the day-to-day successful. My whole job is based on foresight, problem solving, anticipation. How can I be more organized to eliminate the potential for problems? And that in turn gives me more free time.
Right.
It's like we're always on a clock, and I carry that through, my days off. Those kind of practices have made me appreciate the smaller things and the time that I have in my off time. So
Yeah.
where when I was younger, I would just waste a lot of my time, I feel like. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with wasting time and hanging out. But at the same time, all that discipline that I have on my day-to-day has made me appreciate what I could be doing more when I'm not at work. So that's great.
So systems, knowing your metrics, process, organization, these grinding it out in those areas has actually led to more spaciousness in your life and your workplace. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it creates efficiency, right?
Yep.
And once those practices become habits, then you're good.
Yeah.
It's hard to create the habits to begin with and get really good at it. But once the habits exist,
Yeah, totally.
then you make yourself a better person, and it's great.
Yeah, it becomes second nature after it's a habit.
Of course.
Yeah. Love that. So what's keeping you curious? There's no way you guys come up with what you come up with without having the muse stirred within you somehow, be it art, movies, music, your surroundings. I always love to hear where people go to kind of be inspired and remain curious in what they do.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I ask myself that question every day. I think, inspiration keeps me curious. That's probably the biggest thing for me. And when I say that, I mean I'm constantly wondering what's going to excite me and what's going to inspire me, creatively, professionally, and lifestyle wise, I don't always even look for that inspiration. I wait for it to happen naturally.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's a really big part of life. I feel like I'm a advocate of not following trends, and I stay out of mainstream media for the most part. I like to have things to happen naturally, but inspiration is the thing that fuels me. And when I travel's a big thing. When I travel, I get super inspired.
Yeah.
No matter where I'm going, whether it's Japan or Mexico City. I just got back from Mexico City, and the most simple things, whether it's a piece of fruit or the style of clothing or the way the streets look or the way that the night sky looks like in a huge city, whatever it is, I can take something from that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's necessary, and everybody should. And how that fuels you, in what way, and what do you appreciate from those things. And I swear, man, every time I come back from a trip or an adventure, I bring that back to the kitchen, whether it's a complete full dish that's more of a little translation from a place I visited, or if it's just a nuance that I appreciated and I added it and nobody else knows about it but me.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Being, always being in a setting or a place where you can experience something new, it seems as though that does cultivate some sort of inspiration, gratitude. I haven't been here before. Look at that. Newness speaks to us in ways.
Absolutely.
So how, when that moment hits, whether it's fashion, a sunset, a piece of fruit, a horizon, do you subliminally just take notes of that? Do you keep an Evernote file? Are you on paper? How do you bring that back home?
I've tried to get better at it. So I type notes a lot.
Yeah.
I take lots of photographs.
Right on.
And then a lot of it's just kind of spiritual. Like if I leave a situation, sometimes you don't appreciate it until after the fact. And that happens a lot with me too. You
Yeah.
know, there's a
Yeah.
certain smell or a certain vibe or a certain feeling that I had, and I didn't appreciate the feeling until it was gone. And then when I remember back, I'm like, wow, that was magic. And it could be the most simple thing in the world, but I think just recognizing that it existed and that it happened
Yeah.
is really necessary. So
Yeah.
then I document it and I try to recreate it in my own way or try to share it with others in my own way. But yeah, I think it's super important.
You know, one thing that I teach on a lot is this idea that the magic is in the mundane.
Oh
And
yeah.
the question isn't, is it available? The question is, are we available?
Uh, that's a great way to put it.
You know, and so when you say you're on the lookout for inspiration or that's what keeps you curious, I mean, heck, we get the word inspiration from in spirit, inspiration, inspire. Like those words come together. So when you say it,
Absolutely.
you know, when you say it's spiritual, it absolutely, I agree with you 100%. So, man, I've loved this. I could do this all day. What advice would you give to your younger self?
um, it's hard. Um, I think if I could give advice, you know, I would have, I might have said, you know, wake up and pursue your goals sooner. Like I might have been more naive when I was younger and just assuming that, you know, quote unquote, things are going to happen,
Right.
you know, and I realized that things only happen when you make them happen. So I might have told my younger self to jump on board a little quicker. However, you know, I'm pretty proud of the experiences that I've had and the juxtaposition between my professional life and when I was younger. I was more of an adrenaline seeker, and I feel that all of those things have influenced me the way I am today.
Yeah.
But as we get older and we know that the clock never stops ticking, that, you know, it's never too late to, or too soon, I should say, to pursue your dreams, or your
Totally.
goals.
Love it. Love it. So, I know a lot of us know you as like the guy that made food float. In your recollection, how many failed attempts before you actually had something floating? I know you worked on this for years and years to make it happen. It's kind of one of these standard dishes that you guys have. I love chatting with people about failing forward, and yeah, I'd just love to hear that from you.
You know, it actually didn't take long. I think it's a misconception in which
I'll be darned.
in which people think that it and there's been, like, look, the idea of floating food has been around forever, especially with avant-garde chefs, the Spanish chefs, anybody in the molecular field who has a passion for invention, so to speak. Everyone's tried it, but, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, it just didn't take long. It was really a matter of having like helium available.
Right.
I tried it with hydrogen because somebody told me that it was lighter than helium, and I was like, wow, that's why we're failing, because it's going to make it float, and that's obviously a bomb, and that was a horrible idea to bring hydrogen. But I think it was a matter of like actually just having the helium tanks. And when the idea came to me on the sugar solution, it was on a day that we were off. And I was sitting at my house and I said, this combination, and I called our culinary liaison. I said, can you bring a tank and meet me at Alinea? And within like half an hour, this is like 2011 or 12, the first balloon was blown up, and
wow,
the rest is history. But, you know, I've struggled way harder making classical terrines, and you know, that was an amazing accomplishment, and I'm super proud of it. But my day-to-day life is failures, and that's what I like about it.
Love that. And you know, in other interviews that I've seen of you and read some of those things, I love that like you also don't want to be defined by just that.
No,
like you are pressing in, you are failing, but like, no, we're going to keep failing. We're going to keep pushing the envelope. We're going to keep challenging the status quo. It's the essence of the name Alinea. That's why we're here.
look, sometimes you do something and it typecasts you because that thing was bigger than something else that you've done. And nobody wants to be typecast. And as proud of I am of the balloon, because it's an accomplishment, and I'm super proud of it because people said it couldn't be done. And I feel like I harnessed an energy and a thought process that proved that belief wrong. So it's like, wow, this is great. At the same time, I cook classically and my dated, and I think it's also because society's conception of what, they look at as like science food and molecular food. And meanwhile, at Alinea, we do classic escoffier dishes and classical techniques. And then we do this awesome juxtaposition where you have a very thoughtful, nostalgic dish, and then you have a balloon. And it's this whole, balancing act of twists and turns. And that's what's really cool about it. I think sometimes people forget about that and they look at something that they see in social media and they say, wow.
Wow. Man, I love that. That's some deep wisdom there. None of us want to be typecast. and pressing in, again, even the name Alinea itself is, a new beginning.
Exactly.
The next train of thought. And you guys embody that. I can tell you, experiencing the restaurant, you from start to finish, that is the vibe. And we leave with a metaphor, and it carries over into all of our lives. So kudos to you guys. If our listeners want to follow you and your work, where would you direct us? Instagram, Twitter? Where's the best place you would send us?
You know what? I'm gonna send. I'd say Instagram.
Awesome.
And it's just at Mike Bagale.
Mike Bagale, right on.
Yeah.
Well, man, I am super grateful for this chance to get to chat with you. Hope our paths cross soon. I'd love to shake your hand. And,
likewise.
And I told my wife, next time we're sitting at the chef's table.
Absolutely. Well, you know how to find me, so let me know.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon and keep doing great things.
Sounds great.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
You bet, man. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you go online, follow the work Mike is doing. You can follow him on Instagram at Mike Bagale. You can also find out more information about all things Alinea at alinearestaurant.com. And as you approach this week, may you pause by the orchid, listen to the bluebirds sing, and be love.